A GM saying the quiet part out loud. You may not like it, but he's right, even if it's not a good thing. And we're going to take a look at the Guardians' off-season to-do lists and talk about their top priorities.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's show. We want to thank you for joining us in the off-season. We know that there are many sports choice options, and we appreciate you coming and checking out Locked On Guardians. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Swing for the fences on Sleeper picks, and you could win 100x your money. Download the Sleeper app, use the promo code Locked On, and you'll get up to $100 match in your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. And I want to remind you all again that Locked On Guardians, your team every day. And after the first break, I'll shout out an every day. Or Justin, how are you feeling today?
Feeling froggy, just my throat. Actually, no, I'm good. Playoffs are still fun. I picked Tampa Bay to go to the World Series. That didn't work. So
I did it in the offseason as well, and that didn't work.
Yeah, my predictions this year, as we talked about earlier this week, have all been bad. So
I was having flashbacks to, I think it was 2 years ago, where I got every single postseason game wrong until the World Series.
I got the Twins series right, which I said on air. I didn't think the Twins were going to win, but on Twitter I picked them to win, and just because of their pitching and the Blue Jays hitting has been so inconsistent. Now they get to play the Astros, and I don't know, conflicted about who is even worth rooting for in that series. Who's worth pulling for?
I'm going to pull for Texas.
For the Twins still? I don't think he did.
I don't know. I'm rooting. I like Bryce over Locked On Rangers. That's what I said off air, and
Rangers. You're pulling for the Rangers over the Orioles. Okay.
Angela's such a terrible human being. But then the other side is
most billionaires are. I hate to tell you.
No, I mean
there's not a whole lot of good billionaires.
Nobody gets to $1 billion without stepping on a lot of necks. Let's be honest. Anyone who's got $100 million was either an athlete or they've got they're a terrible human being at some level. That's just the way of it. So
speaking of
terrible human being, we're gonna talk about Bryce again. I'm kidding. I love Bryce. Like I said, I'm rooting for Texas just for Bryce.
Locked On Rangers on yeah. No, there are some comments too about Joe Madden about interviewing him. I don't think
it's terrible human beings.
Yes, I don't think Joe Madden. I'm almost positive Joe Madden's not on their list. I think we would have heard that by now.
Bridges, that time in Los Angeles stuff came out, and he's not on their list. I don't think he's going to get a job. I don't think he's managing again at this point. He's done. Yeah, I know that came up. People also asked about Kevin Cash. They're not going to fire him. And again, why would you leave a better team?
Tell me this: if the Rays go out and fire Kevin Cash, who are they hiring that's going to be better? Because this is how I look at all decisions, not just players, coaches, whatever, GMs, everything in sports. And this can apply to anything in life. If you're going to fire somebody from a position, you should first consider, okay, who is going to be better for this role than the person we currently have? And on the Rays, I'm looking at Kevin Cash. There's nobody out there I'd rather have. Like, if he were a free agent today as a free agent manager, there are a lot of teams that would be scooping up. Cleveland, he would be atop Cleveland's list if he was a free agent, but he's not. And
if he was a free agent, he wouldn't come here anyways. Let's be honest.
No, the Rays are a better. I mean, I know even with their payroll situation, the Rays are still a better situation.
If he was canned, like he could go to the Brewers, who are probably I don't know. They're going to lose a lot of guys. So that situation is kind of rough. But like the Giants would be an interest. Like there's just more opportunities, and I think Cleveland is a fine position. It's not like I don't want people.
You think Jerry would push him to Cleveland if he was a free agent?
No, I think a lot of people will take what we say and be like, see, no one wants to manage here. And that's not what we're saying. But it's also not a top 10 position. It's also not, you're going to have to do more with less. There are the upside is
still attractive position. It's not,
it is. No,
it's not the best opening, but it's still a good opening. They're not going to get a Manny Acta this time.
No. And the other nice thing, honestly, about it is, you get time. Like, you're not just going to be, this isn't going to be, this isn't going to be AJ Preller with 6 managers in 10 years where they're forcing him to keep Melvin for one more year. Like that, San Diego is going to be bad next year. Like we can already call that. That was dysfunction city, and they're keeping the dysfunction.
They're going to
this
cut
isn't
payroll.
this isn't San Diego. You know, if you come here, you know you get a good run. You're going to get a real opportunity.
The Angels' job is open. You know, talking about a job. Okay,
this is better than the Angels.
Yeah, that's a conflicting thing, right? Like, oh, I could get Mike Trout, but I could also get one of the worst teams in the sport who never makes the playoffs. Mike Trout might only play 80 games. So, yeah, there are much worse places to go in the AL West too. So, yeah, no Joe Madden, and I don't think the Rays are firing Kevin Cash. And like you said, I don't even know if Cleveland be the top of his list because he'd have everybody interested in him.
I bet he'd be in San Francisco because that the underrated thing with San Francisco is they tried to spend last year and they didn't. They might go out.
Yeah.
I mean, was it Yamamoto, the Japanese pitcher? And I saw a really interesting comment, which kind of stinks. I hope he goes to a National League team. But someone very smartly in our Prospects Live chat pointed out that if you sign one of these Japanese guys now, they're guaranteed to make your team. And they'll make a top 100 list. You're guaranteed to get a first rounder when you sign them.
And they could easily be a rookie of the year away.
Or yes. So like now when you sign a player who's one of these, like in Japan has some potential elite free agents coming over this year, depending on where they go, that could hurt Manzardo, who I just wrote up today. And I if we have time at the end of the show, I want to bring up a fact I discovered while writing him up. That's kind of fascinating about how smart he is as a hitter.
I don't have time. I can tell you.
I don't think we'll have time, but on top of that, it's like, it's really interesting to think about that rookie of the year situation because of the new rules. Like you could sign a guy and not only do you get a great player at a contract, but you get a first round pick bonus.
Possibly. Yeah.
Yeah. Potentially.
All right. So if you haven't been living under a rock, maybe you didn't hear, maybe you're not on Twitter, maybe you didn't see Jerry DiPoto's comments, the Mariners president of baseball operations. The comments weren't great. The way the phrasing isn't great.
I don't think they're bad. I think to me, this is much ado about nothing.
It is, and it is because I think a lot of GMs I think a lot of teams operate this way. He said, we're doing the fan base a favor, asking for their patience to win a World Series while we continue to build a sustainably good roster. He operates with a 10-year plan to win 54% of the time. So what that means is, okay, you play 162 games, right? So over the course of 10 years, you are looking to go, I don't know what the record is, but you're looking to win 54% of over 1,500 games, 1,620 games, right? That's in the long term, that's a good thing to think about. Like that's, I would say 99%, I would say at least
875 games roughly.
Yeah. Well, out of over 1,600. So I think almost all teams are operating this way. If they're not, like there's a few probably goofy ones out there, like the Angels are weird and who knows. I think most GMs think this way, and I think that's why everyone was kind of taken aback by his comments. And Travis Sawchuk, who Cleveland native and writes over at The Score, he posted that the only teams that have won 54% of the games over the last 10 years, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Cardinals, the Guardians, the Astros. It's not a big list. So Jerry DiPoto isn't exactly meeting his goals right now, which is why the Mariners are where they are. But it's also hard because like if every manager thinks that way, it's hard to make a deal, right? Like it's hard to deal with other GMs because they're kind of focused on the same way of roster building you are. So they may not have anything to do with you in terms of trading. This is what the Guardians run into.
And this is why I think it's much ado about nothing. I think it's a smart approach. I think this is the whole idea of like never tearing, but it's also funny because like a lot of people get ticked off. Some of these guys in like, Evan Drellich, I read his article and I love Evan Drellich, even though I can't say his name. Like he's one of my athletic writers I have favorited, so I can find his stuff. But it's like, I feel like a lot of these takes are kind of off base. And I say that because people get mad when teams fire sale. And what this is saying is they're trying to build in sustainability. A year ago, they went in massive. Like Seattle went in and paid a high price for Luis Castillo. They went in and did the Jess Winker trade, which didn't work out for Jess Winker, but the Eugenio Suarez part worked out. Yeah, they were quiet.
Supposed to be a salary dump.
Yeah, but it's like they made those big bold moves, and they don't want to sit there and trade away. So many people at the deadline were trying to make George Kirby trades, and that'd be just moronic. And they have a limited amount of talent. And I do think they'll be willing to make a trade in a year. I think that's why you go out and draft a series of prep guys who are not going to be there in time for your cores. And you get some interesting lower level trade. Like those 3 guys they drafted, it was an interesting draft class. They might have some trade pieces. But I think some of this year was rebuilding their minors, setting it up so they can stay successful, and realizing that, and again, this team spends in free agency. They added Robbie Ray recently. It's not their fault that injuries knocked him out for virtually the entire year, right? Wasn't he like 3 starts and done? I feel like wasn't Robbie
one. It was after the Guardians.
Okay, it was 1 start. So, but it's like, yeah, people got mad because they sold at the deadline by trading Paul Sewald, and that was a weird trade. I admit that, but I think you have to be smart. You can't, if you burn it down to cinders, then you're looking at what the Royals are in, and that is not the right approach either, unless you're going to truly burn it down to cinders and just, because the Royals didn't even do that. They held on to Whit Merrifield till they had no value. So you either have to go all in, which was the Houston Astros approach. Before their 10-year run, they were the worst team in baseball, right? So I think he's speaking out loud, which you're maybe not supposed to say, but it's a smart approach. And Seattle still spends money. They'll probably spend money this offseason. They went out and made massive trades a year ago. They didn't this year. And they were a really flawed team. And I don't think one trade would have, I know they were close. So maybe a trade does help get them over. But I think he's taking the right approach.
Yeah. I'll tell you why I think some of the comments were not great. We come back, and one more thing on DiPoto's comments, and then we'll move on to the Guardians offseason wish list. While you're watching the Major League Baseball playoffs, the Twins moved on, the Rangers have moved on, the Orioles have a ton of good hitters. I would love to watch the Rangers and Orioles series and look at guys like Adolis Garcia, Evan Carter, who had a big series in Tampa Bay.
To say the least.
Anderson, Adley Rutschman. You could bet the over or under on stats for all those guys in that next round. You could do it for Twins players. Royce Lewis, guy keeps hitting home runs. Take the over on Royce Lewis. And if you do it on Sleeper, you can do it to make 100 times your money on the payout on there. So play with your friends or share with them and pick the over-under on home runs, strikeouts, hits. A lot of strikeouts in the playoffs. Pablo Lopez, good first round. So use the promo code LOCKEDON right now on the Sleeper app, and you're going to get $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. And, of course, as always, make sure you're listening to the MLB playoffs on your Sirius XM app, because I know you're not watching games during the day while you work. I'm certainly not doing that. Okay, first off, the Jerry DiPoto thing. If you were to give Chris Antonetti some true serum and ask him the same questions, tell me he would not have a similar version of this take. It would be, if it's not 100% word to word, it's a very similar philosophy, correct?
Yes.
I don't think that's up for debate. I think that's almost guaranteed. He would have some sort of the same answer if you gave him true serum. The reason I think it's not a good comment to make, not only because, like you said, you're saying the quiet part out loud, whatever. Fandom is fickle, and people, you even said at the top of the show, people have a lot of options for how they spend their time, whether it's listening to podcasts, watching sports. Fans don't want to hear that, and that's the problem. Like, I get you want to preach patience, and I'm the same guy who says that I would not want to watch the Guardians if they went all Royal style, because the Royals are bad to watch. There's nothing good about watching them. Like, it's Bobby Witt right now, and that's about it. Or if you really were into Zach Greinke's send-off, I guess. But
yeah,
I'm not watching that. I'm sorry. I know people will say, well, if you win one World Series, it's worth it. And that's true, but there's still a lot of randomness in the postseason. So I'm definitely on board with what Jerry DiPoto is saying, but the problem is you can't sell that to your fans. You can't sell it to say, especially with Cleveland or Seattle, we have two teams that have not won the World Series in forever. Have the Mariners even made the World Series, for that matter? I don't
believe so. I don't believe so.
That's a hard sell to your fans. I get why he's saying, and again, I'm not disagreeing, but yeah, the quiet part out loud there doesn't work because you cannot sell it to your fans. It's not a good look because they have a lot of options, and I understand wanting to go 82 and 80 this year because you're hoping in 3 years from now it pays off into 96 and 66 or whatever. But yeah, it's a hard sell to your fans when you have not won a World Series ever. You haven't been there in forever. So it's it's not the right way to market your messaging. Anything else on Jerry DiPoto before we move on?
Part of the greatest Guardians draft class of all time in 1989.
What was his contribution?
I mean, he had a positive WAR. He actually bounced around as a pitcher for a while.
Yeah,
I have a solid reliever. Was like one of those years in Cleveland. He had a really good year in Cleveland. He had one really good year in Cleveland. I can't remember what year that was. But he was. Again, I think this is. I don't think it's a big deal people are making out to be, and I'll stand by that.
I don't think it is either. I just don't think it's a wise message to sell to your fans because, especially when you're the Mariners, and like you said, the Mariners have done a good job of
the fans go back. They've spent. They're developing.
Here's the problem. And that's a good fan base. I'm just saying. Yeah. I'm not saying Seattle specifically. I'm saying as a whole. And
the bigger problem I think occurs is we saw this with the Twins a few years ago. We're seeing it with Cleveland this year. We're seeing it with Seattle this year. Teams that maybe we might see it with the Reds. Like the Reds didn't kind of fall victim to this trap of when you start to get there maybe a little too early because of other conditions in your division. Like Cleveland, let's be honest, the reason they kind of bubbled up last year on top of the great play was the fact that the Twins rotation was the worst in baseball. And they had the health that we had. They had the health in their starting pitching that we had this year. So, next year it could be more of a competition, but sometimes teams peak a little too early and then expectation jumps. And, that's the Seattle team. It's the same story from the offseason. They have the same problems to fix.
All right. So we're going to take a look real quick at our offseason to-do list for the Guardians. We took a look at some of the things we think they need to address over the offseason, and we're going to rank them in order of importance. So we probably both have the same number one. I'll say mine. It is find. I'm going to say find at least one to start outfielder better than Steven Kwan. It should be two. But I'll start at one. I'll say find at least one outfielder who is better than Steven Kwan. This is not to knock Steven Kwan. It's to say that he should not be your best outfielder.
Steven Kwan would not start for every team in baseball. Let's be honest. Like he's fine. Like you're not looking to replace him. He's fine, but he would not start for every team in baseball.
So I'll start at one. I'll say you need to get at least one outfielder better than him. I'd like to, but if you start at one, you at least you have options to fill number two. So that's number one.
That's number two for me.
Whoa, which number one?
New manager.
Like okay, I'll explain why.
Getting that and really nailing that down and giving that person, if you believe in them, full control and power to hire their own staff and do their own thing and giving them the power that, listen, I am not a big Dolan supporter. I used to be. I'm the person who was dyed in the wool. Listen, it's an ownership group that's out there to make money more than anything else. But the one thing they do super well is they get out of the way. And if you're the manager to a degree, I know it has to be collaborative, but you also have to empower that manager the same way they've been empowered. So I hope they get a manager. I hope it's someone external, someone who's smart, someone who's going to, be less afraid of risk, be a little more, 2023 about managing and a little less, 1999.
Fair. I have manager further down. I'll explain why when I get there. Number two for me is address power shortage. This is not position specific. Like if you think if it's Kyle Manzardo, it's Kyle Manzardo. Whatever you do, and this ties into number one too. It's finding an outfielder better than Steven Kwan because let's be honest here, they're stuck with Miles Straw next year. The only way you're getting rid of Miles Straw is if you are taking on somebody else's bad.
You're stuck with him for 3 years. Like that's
okay.
And that contract goes up in cost every year. Like if you haven't looked at it, it's an escalator based contract. So he's going to make like $8 million in the final year, and you're just stuck with that.
Yeah, the only way you're getting rid of him is if you take on somebody else's bad contract, like they did with who was Gene Segura. Like that's the only way you're making that trade.
Yeah, the Chris Johnson, Gene Segura. There is one small outside chance you can find a team like the Washington Nationals that might have wiggle, and you could do something like Miles Straw and Tyler Freeman for like
Patrick Corbin.
for like a box of balls, like where you essentially give a prospect to get them to take on.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Or,
you could, yes,
or
could
like or like a Kyle Finnegan. Maybe you get like a somewhat. I don't even think Finnegan's good. I don't even really want him, but like maybe you get a extra relief piece and do that. But that's what the only way that gets done.
I have that on my list too. But address power shortage, whether that's the one, at least the one outfielder they need to find better than Steven Kwan, whether it's Kyle Manzardo, have a plan to address the power shortage. If you haven't watched the playoffs so far, Bryce Lewis, all the home runs being hit in the Diamondbacks Brewers series, like the Phillies, power. There's three things in the postseason baseball that are most important: power, strikeouts, and defense. Got to play clean baseball. That's why Tampa Bay is going home. You got to strike guys out, and you got to hit for power. Right now, Cleveland has the defensive aspect down pat. They don't have the power aspect, and their strikeouts are kind of low, which I have that on my list as well. What is number 2 on your list before we?
You're number 1.
Okay, so your number 2 was my number 1.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I will give you. I have 2. I have 9 total, so I'll give you 3 and 4 in just a second.
Okay, Locked On Guardians fans, you may have heard us talk about the new free app just for sports fans called Bunches. Bunches is a new social network built for sports fans. No politics, no doom and gloom. It says unless you're a Yankees fan, but let's be honest, that's all fandom. Just sports. They've recently released a new scoreboard feature that lets you check live scores in the app and chat about live games as they happen. You can chat about the Guardians and join the Locked On Bunch by clicking the link in the show notes description to get the app, or go to the Apple App Store and download Bunches today. Download the Bunches app. When you do, our friends at Bunches have featured Locked On MLB Bunch in the Discover tab. You can click the link in the description/show notes to join the Locked On MLB Bunch community today.
Keep your Sirius XM app available to listen to. I don't think there's going to be any game 3s in the wild card series. There might not be any games tomorrow, but you can listen to the playoffs all postseason long on the Sirius XM app. Okay, so number 3 on my list is help the bullpen regain consistency. Now that could be adding a pitcher to the bullpen to kind of shore it up, which I would like, depending on where it's coming from. I'm not saying sign a free agent, because signing relievers in free agency is a fool's game, but it could be a trade, or it could be a minor league signing, whatever. Or more importantly, figure out what the heck wrong with Trevor Stephan. Help Clase A fight the pitch clock issues. Do whatever you can to help the bullpen regain consistency, because aside from defense, power, and strikeouts, a bullpen in the postseason is incredibly important, and we saw that last year with the Guardians. They need to refine that consistency. And I have find the right manager number 4. Here's why I have manager number 4 below all those things. Because whoever you bring in as manager, it's not going to matter if your best outfielder is Steven Kwan, if you can't hit for power, if your bullpen is inconsistent, all these things I just mentioned that are top 3 on my list. It doesn't matter which manager you bring in. You can't have a manager bringing in Emmanuel Clase. This is a manager specific thing. You can't have a manager burning Emmanuel Clase 70 times a year because he's playing, 71 run games. You can't have, because you can't, you don't have other relievers you trust, because you can't hit for power, because Steven Kwan's your best outfielder. You have to address all those things so your manager comes in and can make decisions without those things looming over his head, because
or
you're just going to blame. You can't blame the manager if you're giving him those problems to deal with next year.
Or you get a manager who's a little more creative and can handle those situations, use more
platoons, but creativity,
move guys up and down the lineup. I'm not saying it fixes anything, but I think, and I've said
creativity
this for a
doesn't
few
make
years,
Bill Brennan a 20 home run hitter.
No, but I think, if you're a little more open to platoons, if you're a little more open to moving players up and down the lineup, if you're willing to do something more like what Cincinnati did this year, I do think that is probably worth 2 to 3 wins.
But is that a roster decision, or is that a manager decision?
I think that's a manager decision. I mean, Tito straight
those
said,
players have to exist first.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tito was also one who played a shortstop in the leadoff spot because they're in the 2-hole, because that's where your shortstop plays, and he didn't want to move anyone else in a lineup. Like every other team in baseball moves guys up and down the lineup versus righties or lefties. Cleveland didn't do that. Yeah, I do agree. I mean, like I said, that's my number 2, but they have to get a forward-thinking manager. They just have to, and that can
What's your
also
number
help
three?
with bullpen usage. So number 3 for me was the power. They have to find a way to get some power in the lineup because they can't be 30th again. That just doesn't work. Having a bunch of guys who, and my caveat is power and walks. They need to go out and add, frankly, a Nolan Jones, Will Benson type, because part of the other problem is this team doesn't walk anywhere near enough. And then, we spent the last 2 shows talking about BABIP. I'm going to bring it up again. BABIP is notoriously fickle. Like, guys will have great years. Guys will, like we said, Nolan Jones with the 400. That's not going to happen again, but it's fantastic he had that great year. At the same time, when your whole team is contact guys, you have those up and down months, and it can be havoc on your team. And they need, I guess in general, it's number 3 is diversifying the lineup. It can't all be the same hitter style. They're loading up with one type of hitter, and that doesn't work. You need guys who walk. You need high contact guys. You need guys with power. They need to mix it up. It can't just be cookie cutter, cookie cutter, cookie cutter. I think that is part of the failure of the lineup right now.
Yep, and walks help with BABIP aggression or BABIP luck. Yeah, that I could put that right up there with power shortage, power/patience. Number 5 for me is have a plan for shortstop, and I think it's almost guaranteed that the next shortstop of this team, at least for 2024 and probably 2025, this shortstop is going to be internal. Whether that is Gabby Arias, whether it's Brian Rocchio, whether it's Andres Jimenez, whether it's, I don't know, Tyler Freeman, whatever. I think the shortstop is an internal thing. Go into the spring training having a plan, whether you think it's going to be Arias first, whether you're going to have a battle, whether you have a pecking order, whether you're going to move Jimenez to shortstop now, whatever that plan is, just have a plan going into spring training with how you're going to have shortstop play out in 2024. You can't go in there just, we're going to have a battle and then we'll see how it happens. Like, no, you need to have a plan of where you want this to go. You can't just try guys out all year. They need to land on somebody. That's my number 5.
For me at number 5, because we talked about it, is to trade Shane Bieber. And this is, I know, a controversial hot take, but here's my view on Shane Bieber right now. And the reason I say you have to trade him is you can go into next season with him and maybe he's great. And then you just end the year and you get a draft pick. But 2 out of the last 3 years, he has missed more than half the year with injury. And if you go through next year and you pay him $13 million and he pitches half the year, they're not going to offer him salary arbitration and you get nothing. So if he has a bad year next year, you go from getting some asset now to getting no asset in a year. And we have done this too many times where we just kind of had that situation with someone like, Michael Brantley had a great year in his walk year, and that was a very questionable decision to not do it. But we've had other situations, even to a degree with Lindor, right? Like, they probably should have moved on earlier. They waited too long and the value went away. They got good pieces relative. They got value, but not the high value. So I think there's too much of a gamble with Bieber. I think you see what the best offers are. There will be offers because it's a very weak pitching market, and you make that deal now because you can trust, I don't know if you can trust, but believing that you've got Quantrill and McKenzie in there, and then you kind of see what's around the fringes, see if there's some pitchers that could be a nice bounce back story. They've had some success with some scrap heap guys. Let's see who's available out there that, again, go target San Diego. I know Ruben is there and they're better about it now, but there are still other teams that are really, really poor.
Agreed. That's why number 6, I have consider pitching depth. And I know you're talking about trading Shane Bieber away. And if they do that, look, going in the next season, your pitching depth in AAA is Cody Morris, Joey Cantillo, Hunter Gaddis. You're hoping Daniel Espino at some point. The pitching depth in AAA is kind of thin. I would like them to, I think they need to address that somehow to have a little more depth for next year, because Morris and Cantillo both have injury track records. We don't really know what Morris's role even is. And you can't have Gaddis and Cantillo as the only guys as your fallback plan when somebody gets injured or something happens, because pitchers get hurt. They miss starts, whether it's 2 or 10. And if you're going to trade Shane Bieber, it's even more complicated. But if you trade Shane Bieber, try to get back a guy who can help you in the rotation next year, whether that's AAA depth or the major league. So they need to address pitching depth somehow. Do you have a 6?
Well, no, I'm just saying, I'm hoping that you get the depth and you get the earlier bit. 6 is just use some of those young guys for the pen. I do think we need some reinforcements. Give Alaman a chance out of camp. I don't think he makes the team, but have his name on a speed dial. And Cade should be given a real chance to make this team next year.
You don't have anything else, right? That was your list. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, it's pretty much my list. I'm sure there's someone I forgot because I didn't write it down. It's from memory, but those are kind of my big things.
I got a 7.89, so I'll just hit him real quick.
Yep.
Approach Tanner Bybee about an extension. I think he is going to finish second in the Rookie of the Year voting, so he's going to get a full year of service time. The Guardians get nothing for that, so they need to approach him about an extension because he's going to have leverage, and they need to get that done, especially because you're not going to do it with Gavin Williams, and you're probably not going to do it with Logan Allen anyway. So Bybee's the one you want to lock up. Number 8, find a way to not punt backup catcher. Look, the backup catcher should only play once or twice a week. You've got David Fry, but the reason you want to have David Fry is because you don't want to have him tied to catching all the time. You want to be able to do other stuff with him. Find a way to not bring in another Cam Gallagher next year. Actually utilize that spot on your roster. I don't care who it is. You have to find somebody as the backup catcher who plays once or twice a week and is not the worst hitter in baseball, whether it's Austin Hedges or Cam Gallagher. I know Hedges is better than Gallagher, but don't punt backup catcher. Actually utilize the damn spot for a change. Number 9, balance the 40-man roster. And this is my lowest one because the 40-man roster is going to fluctuate throughout the year. They've got other stuff they got to work on, and they're going to subtract guys. They're going to add guys, and this always changes throughout the season because of things happen. But try to find a way to balance it. Right now, the 40-man roster is still so very uneven with all these middle infielders. Figure out a way to rebalance it so you've got yourself. Because right now, the only guy you can call from AAA for bullpen help is Tim Herron. Michael Kelly's still in the 40s, so I guess there's him. Maybe you'll add Cade Smith. Maybe they won't. I don't know. I think they will, but who knows? They don't really have a lot of options to call up and down for relief help throughout the year to get a fresh arm. So try to balance out that 40-man roster, whether it's over the offseason, going to spring training, whatever. That's what I'm at.
All sounds good to me. I want to thank you for checking out. Tell us what your points are. If there's anything that we think, we missed, we need to discuss, let us know below. Thank you for taking part, joining us on the show, and go Guardians, go.